threat from a member of the Trump administration, the head of the CIA has admitted North Korea is only a matter of months away from perfecting its nuclear weapons capabilities.
Tonight, Kim Jong-un appears to be so confident in North Korea's nuclear weapons program that one of his diplomats is brashly declaring he's never giving those weapons up.
DPRK's nuclear weapons are non-negotiable unless the U.S. is prepared to coexist with the nuclear DPRK.
The North Korean representative publicly declaring nuclear weapons are off the table, at the same time lobbing a familiar insult at President Trump, calling him
the mentally deranged U.S. dotard.
The ramped-up rhetoric comes just a few hours after the president's national security advisor said this about his boss's position.
He is not going to accept this regime threatening the United States with a nuclear weapon. He just won't accept it.
Former Ambassador Joe DeTrani is one of few American diplomats to ever negotiate with North Korea. He says despite the war of words, conflict is not inevitable.
If North Korea's major issue is security concerns, and their major issue is the so-called hostile policy we have towards North Korea, we're prepared to talk about their security concerns. But we are not walking away from insisting that they eventually will have to give up their nuclear weapons.
Tonight, the U.S. is concerned about another weapon in Kim's arsenal, cyber warfare.
They have a very robust capability. It is cheap. If you compare the amount invested in their cyber program compared to the amount of money invested in their conventional weapon systems programs or their nuclear program, it is pennies on the dollar.
Kim Jong-un is believed to have an army of more than 6,000 hackers, most of them from North Korea's top intelligence agency. Experts say they've improved their capabilities dramatically over the past 5 years, with one skill that stands out.
North Korea is the only government that robs banks.
North Korean hackers are believed to have cyber heisted $81 million from the Central Bank of Bangladesh last year. Analysts say most of the money they steal pays for Kim's weapons programs. The concern now is that North Korea could expand its lists of targets from money to American missiles.
If there's missile defenses or command and control or military operations that are vulnerable, they will be able to get in, and they will look to disrupt them, cause confusion, turn things off.
One thing you need to know about North Korea's nuclear weapons: they're only becoming more dangerous. Each nuclear test, each missile launch, only brings North Korean leader Kim Jong-un closer to his ultimate goal, an intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead capable of striking the mainland U.S. It's only a matter of time. We're seeing this frantic pace of testing, which means that Kim's arsenal is growing quickly and becoming more advanced. Right now, North Korea could launch a devastating strike with conventional weapons on highly populated areas like Seoul or maybe even Tokyo. And soon, those missiles, perhaps with nuclear tips, will be able to go even further and with greater accuracy. Even if North Korea will never match the firepower of the U.S., they have the potential to kill a lot of people and do a lot of damage if they ever feel cornered. Kim's government views these nuclear weapons as vital to their survival as a nation. I've been to North Korea many times, and many times their officials have told me they will not give up their nuclear weapons.
Speaking at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington on Thursday, CIA Director Mike Pompeo warned that North Korea could be only months away from perfecting its nuclear weapons capabilities. He emphasized the need for a concerted global effort to pressure the regime.
They are closer now than they were 5 years ago, and I expect they will be closer in 5 months than they are today, absent a global effort to push back against them. And it is the case that they are close enough now in their capabilities that from a U.S. policy perspective, we ought to behave as if we are on the cusp of them achieving that objective.
one thing that's worth reminding folks is our ground-based missile defense. Those are the ones that hit these things in space, based in the United States and California and Alaska, is only about 50% effective. I'm not willing to roll the dice, and I don't suspect this president is either.
A topic that could come up at today's news conference is North Korea. That regime's deputy UN ambassador reportedly has issued a new threat to the United States, according to Reuters. In a prepared statement, he warned nuclear war could break out at any moment, and the entire U.S. mainland is within their firing range. But just this weekend, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said President Trump is encouraging him to keep working on diplomacy.
He's made it clear to me to continue my diplomatic efforts. Those diplomatic efforts will continue until the first bomb drops.
Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz is a former Green Beret commander and counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Cheney. Good to have you, Colonel Waltz. As you look at this situation, and we're hearing people like Ambassador John Bolton say, we are now at the point where the next move they make, we may have to respond to militarily.
Well, I think Ambassador Bolton is absolutely right in that time is not on our side. The North Koreans have been marching towards this capability for 30 years, and just over the last couple of years, they've developed an ICBM that can strike the west coast of the United States, conflicting reports on whether they can miniaturize a nuclear warhead, tested a hydrogen bomb. And I think what we're going to see going forward is the development of a three-stage ICBM that can strike anywhere in the world, increasingly moving to mobile launchers, which makes it a lot harder for us to get at, and a move from liquid fuel to solid fuel, which means they can launch them a lot faster. So our diplomatic and economic sanction efforts need to have a real sense of urgency, and I'm okay with the president's tough rhetoric because I think that's what it's going to take to change the calculus in the region, with the Chinese in particular.
At a meeting with Japanese officials in Tokyo, Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan also expressed hope for diplomacy while acknowledging it might not work.
We must, however, with our allies in Japan and South Korea and elsewhere, to be prepared for the worst should diplomacy fail.
Vice President Mike Pence did his part to assure Japanese representatives that the U.S. is ready and able to stand up to North Korea.
The United States of America will continue to bring the full range of American power to bear on the regime in Pyongyang, as we hope to achieve through diplomatic and economic means a peaceable solution.
All this happening as the U.S. and South Korea begin joint military exercises off the Korean peninsula involving fighter jets and warships.
The key policy question for us is how long, and again, these are only intelligence estimates, but how far do we let North Korea progress towards actually being able to launch an offensive nuclear strike before we decide time's up?
The president's critics have said that they have concerns that the president is escalating rhetoric and making things worse. You say what?
Well, I say that actually the credible threat of military force is what makes our diplomacy effective. It's that belief with Kim Jong-un and the Chinese leader Xi that we will actually take this program out and take this regime out rather than accept some type of détente. It is that belief that is going to, I think, make them finally take action. The Chinese could choke off the North Korean regime economically tomorrow if it wanted to, but right now it sees this as a United States problem and a South Korean problem, not their problem. That's the dynamic that has to change.
And, when you talk about those sanctions, you've got the UN sanctions, the Treasury secondary sanctions, the Chinese banking sanctions all together. How much difference are they making right now?
Well, the Chinese are very good at kind of agreeing to things publicly, but then not actually enforcing. And so it's that enforcement piece where we have to hold their feet to the fire. And on the secondary side, that means we are actually sanctioning Chinese entities who do business with North Korea. I want to see us, on the diplomatic side, expand a coalition of others, Europeans, the Australians, Southeast Asia, that are also sanctioning those Chinese entities. It's only when China feels the economic kind of pain from its business with North Korea do I think they'll actually take action.
All right, let's talk about the military. Colonel Waltz, what does it look like if we do have to stick a foot in? Because it won't be a toe. It'll be a foot if we have to respond to something. Who gets on board? You just name those nations that are getting on board with sanctions, but who gets on board militarily with us?
Well, listen, make no mistake, the military option is as awful as described. We will lose thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of civilians if war breaks out on the North Korean peninsula. And I think there are steps that we can take to change the security dynamic, again, from the Chinese standpoint, before we get to a preemptive strike. That is, we could reintroduce tactical nukes back into South Korea. We had those up until the 90s. The Japanese are looking at going offensive with their military, which right now is precluded by their constitution. So I think if China looks at the security landscape and sees things moving in a direction it doesn't like, again, it might finally take action.
So, you know, I guess the worry is that China may take too long and that the clock is not really ticking the way it is for North Korea and China simultaneously. China can kind of sit back and feel the weight of the sanctions, but if North Korea just calls on a Wednesday and says, or doesn't, and does something without calling, that they're ready to go with their nukes, I mean, are the timetables going to link up? Can we wait for China to make a decision to get tough?
Well, that is, Harris, the critical question, and what I would expect President Trump is going to be raising with Chinese President Xi in his Asia trip that's upcoming. And, you know, I can't imagine, you know, one thing that's worth reminding folks is our ground-based missile defense. Those are the ones that hit these things in space, based in the United States and California and Alaska, is only about 50% effective. I'm not willing to roll the dice, and I don't suspect this president is either.
Look, I just want to bring up the point. We made a deal that far benefited Iran more than it did anybody else, including us, and we barely have eyes on what they're doing through the IAEA. We don't have the kind of eyes on North Korea and what they're doing. So are we even confident that we know where they are right now? That's a fair question. Yes or no, and then I got to let you go.
I don't know, and I don't suspect that folks here in Washington know, because we don't have great assets in North Korea.
Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, appreciate your expertise and your time, sir. Thank you.